be things like tuning your transponder that you won't even think about. It's so much easier than having to turn all these little dials. You just punch it in. You won't have ADF and all that stuff. No more round holes.
I won't be able to listen to the baseball game on AM radio anymore. Welcome to Sean Air. This video is a corollary to a previous video on my Second Wind playlist on YouTube. If you haven't seen that first video, I highly recommend you go check it out. In the last video, I brought you along on my journey to Dunellon, Florida, where I met the fine folks at Saint Aviation, who installed our brand new Dynon SkyView HDX avionics panel. This first segment features the complete interview with Jesse on the topic of how to get started with your panel upgrade. Let's take a look. So we're here with Jesse Saint, and we're going to ask a few questions that are common to the types of questions that a first-time interaction might sound like. I guess what you probably experience when you meet someone for the first time who's interested in an avionics upgrade on their old airplane is they probably have the same kinds of questions, or maybe sometimes they know how to begin the conversation but don't know what they should be asking, and you kind of guide someone who might be calling you the first time. What can they expect, and what would you recommend?
Yeah, well, we get a lot of calls from people who just say, I want new avionics. I've got an old, I just might have just bought an old plane, and it's got 1970s radios and instruments in it, and they're just trying to find something. I want to bring it to the 21st century. Some people just want the basics. They just want, I want to be legal to be able to fly in, ADS-B airspace, or I want to be able to fly IFR. I want a navigator. I want to get a GPS. Some people just say, I want everything new. I want to take everything out and gut it and put all the new, latest, greatest stuff in there. Normally we'll start out with, what's your final goal? What's your final mission to fly? Figure out what options there are based on that. Do you want just a GPS, doing a little bit of so-called light IFR, not doing a lot of approaches, not flying overseas where you need to do IFR approaches and stuff like that. We might put a GPS, GPS navcom if they're going to do a little bit more, maybe a GPS navcom and a second navcom, although that's less common. And it's just, we start the conversation. Some people know exactly what they want. They say, I want two Dynon 10-inch screens. I want an Avidyne 540 or 440 navigator. I want a new PMA 450B audio panel. There's so many different options. Some people just say, I want good audio, I want a good GPS, I want an ADS-B in and out, and I want a nice EFS with synthetic vision and moving map. And we make suggestions from there. A big part of the equation is budget. Budgets are flexible, and usually the budget's smaller than what they end up spending, just because they don't have a realistic expectation. Some people, the budget's not an issue. They just say, I want this, I don't care what it's going to cost. You can start, budget's anywhere from $8,000 to $65,000 for panels we've done. So it all depends on where they want to get. But it's a conversation. We sit down and we do it over the phone. Usually I have people send me the list of things they think they want, or a list of features they want, and a couple pictures of their panel. Then I can figure out what stuff in the panel can stay, because a lot of times they might have a good Garmin 430W or 530W, a decent audio panel. Maybe they already have ADS-B, maybe they don't. If they know where they want to get, maybe we can split it up into phases. Start with the radio stack, get that modern, and then when they get the money, go to the EFS. And there's a lot of people where we have started with some basic stuff and added on to it. And what we like to do is, if they're going to take it to phase 2 or even a third phase of upgrades, we try to plan the first phases so they're not taking stuff out in phase 2 to replace it with newer stuff. So we kind of plan for the long term with all this stuff. So we figure out what they have, figure out where they want to be, and come up with a couple different recommendations of how to get there.
Make a plan to get there, and especially if you can cut the panel in a way that you can allow for future installations, because that was one of the features that we went with on our panel. Was we have a section cut in case we'd like to add on the Dynon radio to our existing system now, and we weren't sure what we would do in the future, but while we're cutting a panel, let's go ahead and put one in there. We can cover it up in the interim, and then we always have the option to go back and add on later on, which we the more we play with it, the more we realize we might go that direction in the future as well. So
it's also real common if they want to start with one screen, but they think they might add a second screen. If there's room, we'll cut a hole for the second screen, put a plate over it, and maybe mount or hang an iPad there. iPad's a great tool, a great flight planning tool, great navigation tool for VFR, but also you can have sectionals and approach plates and stuff like that on it. But the real big issue is getting into glass panels. You know, the Dynon SkyView, a lot of people are putting in the Garmin G3X. For more basic glass, you know, the Aspen E5 is a fairly common one. More common is the Garmin G5, you know, a pair of G5s where you have a PFD and an HSI, or at least a DG. So, and there's also engine monitors is a big thing. You know, maybe in a Cessna 150, an engine monitor, you know, is not as big of a deal. A fuel computer, if you're just doing 1 hour flights for flight training, it's not as big of a deal as, you know, maybe a 182 or a Bonanza where you're doing long range flying and you have a, you know, high performance engine that you really want to keep good track of. So there's just so many different options out there, and I've installed lots and lots of different navigators and EFISes and autopilots and transponders and things like that.
what is probably the selling point for us when we were researching, we flew over 300 miles to get here because we saw recommendations everywhere we looked to find Jesse Saint, who's done Dynon installations, which was important to us because sometimes, especially with emerging avionics, it's not all equal, right? So we wanted to make sure we had an experienced mechanic, and we were very happy with the way that the result turned out. How many installations would you say that you've done of a Dynon system?
Dynon system in general, probably pushing 100, maybe even more than that. I've been working with Dynon since the D10A was new, and that was probably 15, 16 years ago. When we put a D10A in our RV10 instead of putting a 6-pack and an engine monitor and EMS D10, and then we moved up to the D180 and then the SkyView and the SkyView Touch and then finally the HDX. So we've been installing Dynon for a long, long time. And one reason I like Dynon is because when they designed the SkyView and then they went to the SkyView Touch and then the HDX, they're all wired the same. They all fit in the same hole in the panel. All the remote modules are the same, so the interface, even from the original EMS D10 to the new engine monitor module, they're pinned out the same. So if you have an EMS D10 or a D120 or a D180 and want to put in a SkyView, now this is experimental, of course, it's all pinned out the same. But Dynon's whole plan is, let's make it easy for people to upgrade. Let's make it so if they want to put a new screen in, they take out the old one, put in the new one, it plugs in the same, it wires the same. And for the certified planes, the modules for the Dynon are really small. So, and they have a tray that mounts to the panel where the screen mounts that holds, you know, a lot of times more than half of all the remote modules are right there in a tray to keep it out of the controls and to give easy access to it.
Yeah, well, thank you again for your time. Thanks for the build. You know, it took us probably right around the 4-week mark from start to stop, and that's about average, I suppose, but you were excellent to work with. We appreciate your transparency and your honest work, and we hope to see you again soon with maybe any other projects we have and
sounds
later
good
on as well. So thank you for your time.
Enjoy it.
After owning the HDX for just a few months, I can tell you that I am so much more confident filing IFR and flying in challenging weather. Choosing the right panel was a process, but part of what sold me on the SkyView HDX was its intuitive design and familiarity somehow to other glass panels I'd flown in the past. This next segment is the expanded interview with Bo, the mechanic who actually installed the HDX in our plane. Before he did, he gave us the exclusive and all his favorite bells and whistles from the system. Let's watch. Can you walk us through what we've decided on for the layout maybe and some of the features?
Yeah. So the idea, as I understand it, is we're going to be putting 2 massive 10-inch screens to very high resolution touch screen, but it also has soft keys and knobs. And you're going to have your PFD with, well, I'd say it's a 6-pack, but it's a whole lot more than a 6-pack built into tapes instead of round gauges. All these round gauges and analog gauges are going to go away, and they're going to show up wherever you want to put them on the panel. And of course, that's all going to have audible warnings. So, you know, you get low oil pressure, it's going to shout near your oil pressure. And you can have engine monitor on it, you can have your map page on it. So one of them is going to be centered right over the left yoke here, Then on the other side, we're gonna have another screen, identical. You can set it up however you want. You can set it up the same as the left side. You can set it up all engine, all map. My favorite thing about the engine monitor is actually the fuel flow. Not only does it tell you how much fuel you're using, but it calculates how fast you're going and how far you're going. And it'll tell you how much fuel your levels will be at when you get there. It allows you to take off and utilize the fuel range that you have, because you can be like, okay, I want to land with 12 gallons, and this says I'm gonna have 13 when I'm there. I know I can continue, rather than having to constantly calculate it yourself and figure it out.
Like I was doing on the way down here today.
Exactly, exactly. It'll show you the weather on your map. So wherever you have it, whether you have it split here or full over here, it's a very high resolution weather depiction and quite accurate as far as I've found. But also, one thing I really like about the weather is you can see how long it's been. We're gonna have a knob panel, which has 3 knobs. It'll have your heading track knob, your baro knob, and the altitude bug. One of the features I love about that knob panel the most is you can press in on the baro knob, hold it in, and it'll set it to the most relevant baro setting. Yeah, so it gets it from ADS-B, and then like if you're on the ground here and it has no ADS-B signal, it'll just get GPS altitude and put it in. The other thing with the engine monitor is being able to see all of your CHTs. And what do you have here for CHTs?
Just
and EDTs?
oil temp, that's all I got.
You have no CHTs and EDTs.
Nothing,
So
I lean it by RPM drop. Yep.
You literally, when you're climbing out, you don't know what your cylinders are.
Right.
When it might scare you actually the first few times you fly, because you're like, oh, I didn't know I'm actually going to 417 on that cylinder when I'm climbing out. So it helps you preserve the longevity of your engine, especially with this being a higher performance engine. And then the leaning capability, yes, the RPM works, but to be able to see actually how many degrees lean a PQ are, and that's extremely helpful. Of course, you're not a constant speed prop, but you will have manifold pressure there. So you'll be able to see exactly how much power you're making, which is helpful as well. Oh, look at here. You've got an electronic flap indicator here.
Yeah.
So that's going to go on your screen now.
Oh, great.
So that will actually, you'll have a little indicator that indicates just like that.
I've been a bit unhappy with that one because it appears to be arbitrary when it indicates.
Yeah. So and that might carry through as far as it might be a problem with the sender itself. Or not sender, but essentially it's a potentiometer on the flaps. And if the potentiometer on the flaps is actually the part that's messing up, that will carry through. If it's this, which hopefully it is, sometimes it is, then it will be much more accurate. So you'll be able to see exactly where your flaps are. That's real handy.
Excellent.
So then we're gonna have the Dynon Autopilot, which is the best autopilot general aviation has ever seen. Imagine it'll fly an ILS, it'll fly GPS, it'll fly the vertical GPS. It'll fly indicated airspeed climbs and descents. I love the indicated airspeed because then, well, you don't have to constantly adjust your vertical speed as your performance decreases or increases with altitude. That autopilot system is actually stepper motors rather than the old solenoids and brushed motors, so it handles turbulence very well. The older autopilots, it's good to turn them off when you're in turbulence because those solenoids bouncing back and forth isn't good for it. The stepper motors, you don't have that issue.
The trimming will be an informative banner on your screen that tells you trim nose low or trim nose high, and you have to manually trim and adjust your throttle still. So as far as autopilots go, it's a 2-axis autopilot. It doesn't have rudder compensation.
There's no yaw damper. That they make it for like Bonanzas that have a lot of tail wags. Cessnas are locked on. Other than maneuvering, you get adverse yaw. But and then the trim system, since you're only manual trim system here, it would have to be a very complicated servo to install auto trim.
And that's just not worth it.
And it's not STC'd. So there is no auto trim, but you'll get arrows up here where it says AP, your autopilot symbol. You'll get arrows that either scroll down or scroll up, showing you to trim up or down. Then we're going to be in the radio stack. We're going to leave the audio panel actually, because it's actually a decent audio panel that you have already. The GNC 300XL is going to be, I believe you're moving it down, right?
We're moving it down to be Comp 2.
Yeah, so we're going to have this moved down, and we're going to put the IFD 440 here. IFD 440 is a slide-in replacement for a Garmin 430, which is already a good navigator, but it's the 440 is a lot better in that it's a bigger screen and it gets so much more information than the 430. For instance, when you go to tune a frequency, when you start to turn the knob, it pulls up the most relevant frequencies. The traffic shows up in a couple different ways on here. It'll show up in different colors on your map, depending on how relevant it is. So if it's way below you, then it'll be either black or yellow, and it'll be either a filled in circle or not. It'll show their heading and their vertical speed trend. And then it'll also show up on your PFD if they're in front of you. If they're in your field of view on your PFD with the synthetic vision, you'll actually see the traffic going across your PFD. That makes a massive difference. I had a near miss once and I saw him on the PFD before I saw him outside. That allowed me to maneuver as necessary.
Well, all this is going to look so different when we come back in maybe a month or 6 weeks. Well, thank you very much for taking us through it.
Looking forward to installing it.
Weren't those guys great? I'm no professional filmmaker, and I only showed up with this small camera, but those guys went above and beyond to help me with my last video. I learned a lot from hanging out in their hangar for just a few hours, and I certainly appreciated their southern hospitality and friendliness. This video is not sponsored by anyone or anything. I'm just really enthusiastic about the result, and I've been pleasantly surprised by the facelift the RO plane got. I want to mention that I catered a lot of my questions and content to the Dynon brand, since that's what's in my plane. But Saint Aviation installs all sorts of brands like Aspen, Avidyne, or Garmin. So if you want to get your panel upgraded, I hope you learned something about that process in this video. And I do also hope you give Jesse a call. Take it from me, we were very happy with his work. So long for now. I'll be putting out videos soon on some preventative maintenance and aircraft ownership discussions as they have been occurring at the hangar. If you haven't seen it yet, here's a link to the story video of getting this new panel installed. Be sure to like, subscribe, and tell a friend. I'll catch you later.